the Senior Policy and Coordination Officer at the Minamata Convention Secretariat, and it gives me great pleasure to be with you today alongside my colleagues Lara Ognibene and Esa Kutoda to take you through a briefing on the amended Annex A of the Convention. I will introduce my colleagues in one moment and ask them in the meantime to put on their cameras so that you know who's here with you this afternoon, recognizing, of course, there are a couple of other colleagues in the background, as usual, that help us make this event possible. But firstly, just to thank you for being here and for this briefing, which is, of course, a particularly important part in the journey of the Minamata Convention, because an amendment of an annex is quite a big step forward for the convention and its parties. But with that, I will be joined in our briefing by Lara Ognibene. Lara is our legal officer, and there you see her on the screen. And I'll also be joined by Esa Kutoda, our senior program management officer, responsible for scientific and technical matters, and who will also, of course, be part of our briefing today. Just to say that we gave this briefing already once today in the morning to try to be of service to all the parties and stakeholders in a time zone perspective looking east, and now probably we will have more of our parties and stakeholders from a time zone perspective looking west, but we're of course happy to have, I think even a person from Japan dialing in very late. So thank you very much for your interest in this topic. Just to start, as questions might come up, please feel free to write them in the chat. You might already have questions before we start our briefing. Maybe some of the questions will be answered during our briefing, but please feel free to begin typing any questions you would like to have for clarification so that we may get ready to be able to give you clarity on that as soon as possible. Our presentation is not very long, but we would probably take the first half an hour to give you this presentation and then have another half an hour for comments and questions and clarifications. So with that, let me turn to the next slide and to give you an overview of this briefing. And the main point why we're having this briefing is that at our recent COP, at our COP 4.2, the COP took a decision 4.3, to amend Annex A, which is the annex dealing with mercury-added products for phase-out. As you know, that annex is composed of two parts, part 1 and with a list of product categories, and part 2 with a list of measures for the product dental amalgam. Part 1, all of those products in the original annex were listed for phase out by 2020, and in part 2, the measures for phase down of dental amalgam are listed there. Let me identify here that, of course, the amendments that were agreed on, the amended Annex A, means that from in the amended Annex A, we will have in Part 1 8 additional product categories of mercury-added products that are added for phase out by 2025. And also in part 2, we have 2 additional measures that were added for dental amalgam phase down and the overall management of dental amalgam. So with that as background, but we hope to give you much more detail in the coming minutes and so on. We've structured our presentation or our briefing in 3 parts. I'll give you a background on the amended Annex A. Lara will then present the procedure for the amended Annex A entering into force. And Esaku will then give you some information on what the amended Annex A means in practice for our parties. And as I mentioned, we aim to conclude in such a way that there's enough time for an open floor for clarifications and other information. With permission, I see that there is a hand raised by one of our attendees. If you could, in the meantime, write your note in the chat. If you need technical assistance, one of my colleagues will be in contact with you now. Otherwise, we will please be sure I note that we will come back to you. But if you could write your comments or questions or observations in the chat for the benefit of everybody else as well in this meeting. With that, may I ask for the next slide kindly, and I just want to give you a small background to the amended Annex A of our convention. Why do we have an Annex A in the Minamata Convention? As you know, of course, the logic of the convention is built around, on the one side, to reduce the supply of mercury, both from geological reserves, but also from other stocks and sources, to reduce that supply into our economy, into our industry, into our society, and of course, into our environment. So what you see on the left-hand side of this diagram in terms of supply. And then a very important part, logic foundational to the Minamata Convention, is that we are also that there are many provisions that are seeking to reduce the demand of mercury, and that is both in artisanal small-scale gold mining, but as a process, but certainly also through Article 4 in mercury-added products, and also other processes, Article 5. So here in this diagram, I've just put a box around what Article 4 really looks at, which are mercury-added products, and the provisions that the convention has outlined and that parties have taken on, which is to phase out the use of the products listed in Annex A. And that's where this all comes together. Both Article 4 being setting out the intent to reduce these products, and Annex 4 listing the actual products or product categories that are intended for this. In the golden box, you will see I have pasted two of the different paragraphs in Article 4. There's a much more, but certainly these two. First is that Article 4 hinges on the fact that parties have agreed not to allow, by taking appropriate measures, the manufacturer, import, or export of mercury-added products listed in the annex in Part 1 after this phase-out date specified for those products. And except, of course, if a party has applied or has registered for an exemption as per Article 6. Also in that article, in paragraph 3, parties have committed to take measures for the mercury-added products listed in Part 2. We have one mercury-added product in Part 2 that is dental amalgam, and so this third paragraph speaks to that particular product category and the measures thereunder. What the amended Annex A now looks at, if you look, which is what we will speak about for the rest of the presentation. But in short, what you will see at the bottom, or what you see at the bottom of that golden square, is that Part 1 is about product categories, 8 of them, the original one, now having more added, and Part 2 is about dental amalgam, where there were 9 measures, and now we have another 2 added. Moving to the next slide. Article 4 has, of course, more than just those 2 paragraphs. There are also a couple of others which I'd like to draw your attention to under the overall, because, of course, the convention that was finalized in 2013 intended to be alive and living and take on board new information as necessary and as the COP would decide, and therefore in its paragraph 8 made provision for no later than 5 years after entry into force for the Annex A to be reviewed in case there need to be amendments made to the product categories that are listed in Part Part 1 and 2. And this review took place, of course, intercessionally between COP3 and COP4. Many of you that I see on the call were, of course, involved in the work of that. There was also, as you know, it wasn't just a review of Annex A, but also a review of Annex B, the annex on products, as set out by Article 5. And it's based on this thorough review over that time that the COP considered what is in Annex A, and after very detailed and deliberate deliberations during COP4 in Bali, decided to amend the annex. And the process for that amendment to have come forward was not only based on the review of the annex, but also was based on three proposals being submitted by parties, and they are displayed here under this gold line. In fact, all of the documents on the right-hand side are the documents that went to COP4 that laid out the groundwork for considering to amend Annex A and then for deciding to amend Annex A. But in the top two documents are the give you information more on the review, while the documents under the golden line show you the proposals that were initially made. There's a specific process, and it's with timelines, and it gives space and time for parties to consider what they need to have in front of them. You will see that in Article 4, it does say that proposals for any amendment of the annexes need to include all important information related to such proposals, and also feasible options for replacement if a product is indeed decided to be phased out. So looking at the proposals that we received at the Secretariat and which were communicated in 6 months ahead of time of the COP4 meeting, and looking at them in reverse order, at the bottom you will see the proposal put forward by Canada and Switzerland, which Norway joined, and their proposal was for a set of products to Part 1 of Annex A. Then there was the proposal by the Africa region, and their proposal was for a set of products to both Parts 1 and 2 of Annex A. And thereafter, there was also the proposal by the European Union to amend both Annex A and Annex B, the one on processes. And you can, of course, see the original proposals in these documents. They are hyperlinked, and we will make this presentation available afterwards. But that is the background. What happened after that is based on all of this documentation and information and the deliberations at the COP. So if I could go to the next slide, please. There was the COP decision 4.3. You'll see on the left-hand side an outline of the main takeaways of the decision. On the right-hand side, I realize that you cannot read those tables, so let me speak to them in 1 second. But let me just outline that the COP4 decision, which again is hyperlinked and you can access them here and on our website, the COP4 decided on adding 8 new product categories, which Isako will elaborate on in a moment, to Part 1 of Annex A, and it also added 2 more measures on dental amalgam to Part 2 of Annex A. In other words, quite a step forward, and quite important to recognize just how much parties committed to. But there was more, and that is the second table here on the left at the bottom, because in the continuation, because COP4 also identified 4 further product categories for phase out. What COP4 did not yet complete its deliberation on is the time by which those products are to be phased out. And that is indeed work for COP5 to pick up. So in other words, we have in the amended Annex A, 8 new product categories and 2 more measures. And also with the same decision, we have a COP putting forward 4 more product categories at COP5, and for COP5 to deliberate on the dates of the phase out. To help you as parties and stakeholders keep track of all of this, what we've done is, of course, you can see the decision on our website, but we have also made another document, the Add 1 document, and this is also what was communicated through the depository that sent out official notification of the amended Annex A that Lara will speak to a little bit about in a moment, on the 28th of September. What we've done is to put the new product categories into the original annex. And so you will see here in gray shade the new product categories to part 1 on the left-hand side and the added measures on the right-hand side on dental amalgam in part 2. I realize that you cannot see those two. I just wanted to give you a visual of all of them together, but I will also put into the chat in a moment the links for you to open those documents while we go through the rest of the briefing. And with this, I would like to hand over to Lara to walk you through, with the next slide, through the procedural aspects of entry into force of the amended Annex A. And let me just also say we were incredibly impressed that the amended Annex A was a consensus decision, which is very important to emphasize. Lara, please over to you for the next part. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And hello, everyone. My name is Lara Ognebene. I'm the legal officer with the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention. And I would like to speak about a few slides on the procedure for entry into force of amendments to annexes to the convention. We can move to the next slide, please. So, pursuant to paragraph 4 of Article 26, the Secretary General of the United Nations, acting in his capacity as depository of the Convention, has issued a communication following the adoption of the COP4 decision on review and amendment of Annexes A and B to the Minamata Convention on Mercury. The communication, including the texts of the amended Annex A in the 6 UN languages, was posted on the 28th of September 2022 on the UN Treaty Collection website, and it's available at the link that I added in this slide for you to see. So this date has consequences for the entry into force of the amended Annex A. So pursuant to paragraph 4 of Article 27 of the Convention, amendments to annexes to the Convention shall enter into force for a party on the expiration of 1 year from the date of the communication by the depository. So in this case, this will be on the 28th of September 2023. This is pursuant to our paragraph 3C of Article 27 of the Convention. This will be so except for any party that, pursuant to paragraph 3B of Article 27, has notified the depository in writing that is unable to accept the amended text. Furthermore, for any party that made a declaration with regard to amendment of annexes in accordance with paragraph 5 of Article 30, in this case, any amendment shall enter into force for such party on the 90th day after the date it has deposited with the depository its instrument of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession with respect to the amendment. So to sum up these 3 last bullets, under the first bullet, where entry into force is tied to the communication by the depository, after 1 year since that notification, the amendment will enter into force. No action is required by parties to allow such entry into force. Under the second bullet, there is an exception. In case a party cannot accept the amendment, then it can notify the depository in writing that it is unable to accept the amended Annex A. And this will suspend entry into force until such notification is withdrawn. The depository shall without delay notify all parties of any notification of non-acceptance received. A party may at any time notify the depository in writing that it withdraws a previous notification of non-acceptance in respect to an amendment to an annex, and the annex shall thereupon enter into force for that party. And finally, on the third bullet, we have received notifications from 16 parties who have submitted a declaration under Article 30, paragraph 5. And for those parties only, entry into force will happen 90 days after the date they deposit with the depository their instrument of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession. We can now move to the next slide, which is about exemptions for phase-out dates listed in Annex A. So the date of entry into force of amendments to annexes to the convention has implications for a party wishing to register an exemption pursuant to Article 6. So taking a step back, Article 4, paragraph 1 states that each party shall not allow, by taking appropriate measures, the manufacture, import, or export of mercury added products listed in Part 1 of Annex A after the phase-out date specified for those products, except where an exclusion is specified in Annex A or the party has registered an exemption pursuant to Article 6. So this is what we're speaking about a possible exemption pursuant to Article 6. So Article 6, paragraph 1b states that parties may register for one or more exemptions for the phase-out dates associated with any mercury added product added by amendment to Annex A. There are some formats to be used for registering such exemptions for phase-out dates listed in Annex A, and they are available on our website at the link that I included in the slide, and they have also been adopted by COP1, so you can make reference to those formats at the link. Let's move to the next slide. I will give you a bit more information on exemptions. So parties that want to register an exemption have to do so in writing no later than the date upon which the applicable amendment enters into force for the party. So this can be, as I mentioned in my first slide, within 1 year after the communication by the depository of the adoption of the amendment to the annex, only in absence of a notification of non-acceptance under paragraph 3b of Article 27, or upon withdrawal of a notification of non-acceptance, allowing the entry into force of the amendment, or the last possibility is 90 days after the date of deposit of the instrument of ratification of the amendment for those parties who have submitted a declaration according to paragraph 5 of Article 30. And as I mentioned, we have 16 parties who have done so far. As a quick note on this matter, pursuant to paragraph 2 of Article 4, parties may indicate at the time of ratification or upon entry into force of an amendment to Annex A for it, that it will implement different measures or strategies to address products listed in Part 1 of Annex A. The United States is the only party who has notified its decision to use this alternative at the time of ratification. Let's move to the next slide, please, which is my last slide, and where I have attempted to sum up in a timeline the deadlines that I have mentioned in my earlier slides. So we can start with the date of the depository's notification, which is the 28th of September 2022. Within 1 year, parties have the possibility of notifying non-acceptance under paragraph 3b of Article 27. After 1 year from the date of notification of the depository, the amendment or amended Annex A in this case will enter into force on 28th September 2023, except for those parties who made a declaration under paragraph 5 of Article 30, or those who have notified a non-acceptance under paragraph 3b of Article 27. All this process will happen before the beginning of our next COP, COP5, which is scheduled to take place from 30th of October to 3rd November 2023 in Geneva, as you may know. These dates also have an implication for parties that would like to register an exemption with respect to the phase-out dates listed in Part 1 of Annex A. If that is the case, parties shall notify in writing the Secretariat no later than the date upon which the applicable amendment enters into force for the party. This is my last slide. Let me stop here. And of course, I'm available in case you have any questions at the end of the session. And I will now give the floor to my colleague, Eisaku Toda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lara. And my name is Eisaku Toda, Program Management Officer responsible for scientific and technical issues in the Minamata Convention Secretariat, and I'm presenting some technical information on the amendment, i.e. what does it mean in practice. As Claudia said, the technical information on the availability, feasibility, and the impact of alternative products was made available through the intersessional work by an expert group before COP4 and submission by parties. These pieces of information is available as COP document, but perhaps it is quite challenging for you all to go through all these docs. So I took the essence of information from these documents. Our thanks go to all the parties and experts who provided information. Next slide, please. I have 4 slides about 8 products added by COP4, dental amalgam, and 4 products for COP5. And my first slide is about fluorescent lamps, 2 of the 8 products added by COP4. The lamps are one of the most visible things in Minamata Convention. What the amendment means is that you will not see most compact fluorescent lamps in stores after 2025. Annex A includes different types of lamps, fluorescent lamps and mercury vapor lamps. And fluorescent lamps, they're different kinds. The compact fluorescent lamps and linear fluorescent lamps and some others, CCFL and so on. Compact fluorescent lamps, as you see in the picture on the bottom left, this is about what is called CFLI. I means integrated ballast, and ballast is a device to control electronic current. You see in the small picture at the bottom, and so the CFLI is a lamp, the fluorescent lamp that you can fit the light bulb sockets. If you look at the right hand side, as the white cells are what the original Annex A has, and the gray shaded part was added by the COP4. The currently the CFLs are less than 30 watts that contains 5 milligrams or more mercury are to be phased out by 2020. And the what the gray shaded part says is that the CFL eyes that are less than 30 watts and not exceeding 5 milligram per lamp uh, are to be phased out by 2025. Therefore, any CFL eyes less than 30 watts are to be phased out by 2025. And 30 watts, this 30 watts fluorescent lamps is quite equivalent to more than 100 watts of incandescent lamps. Most of the compact fluorescent lamps are under 30 watts. The next one is the what is called CCFL and EEFL, and you don't usually see these lamps. They are at the back of the electronic displays. There used to be limit to mercury contents, as you see in the small table on the right, but the like CFLIs, the amendment to is to cover all CCFL and EEFL, no matter how much mercury is contained. The next slide, please. This is about the remaining 6 products. The strain gauges measure blood pressure and blood flow. Mercury was used in rubber tube to transmit pressure. Melt pressure transducers, transmitters, and sensors are used to identify changes in pressure in various devices. Mercury was also used to transmit pressure. Vacuum pumps are used to create very low pressure. Mercury was used to draw air to create vacuum. Mercury was added to specialized silver halide photographic papers and motion picture films to improve image quality. Mercury was also used in tire balancers and wheel weights to prevent vibration of automobile wheels. The alternatives, non-mercury alternatives have been available for a long time, and the COP4 agreed to list these products in Annex A in order to prevent the restarting of the production of these products. The last one interesting addition is mercury used as spacecraft and satellite propellant. It was used in the 1960s, but has not been used for a long time. However, there was an information on plans to use it again, and therefore COP decided to include it in Annex A to prevent it from coming back. The next slide is about part 2 of Annex A, the dental amalgam. In the table on the right hand side, the existing 9 measures are listed in white, and the added 2 measures are listed in gray. The original part 2 of Annex A is obliged parties to take 2 measures out of 9 measures listed in the original text, and the addition is the 2 mandatory measures. They parties are to implement these measures. It is not for choice. They have to parties have to take 2 measures. One is to move away from the use of mercury in bulk form in dental amalgam, which means that the dental amalgam needs to be used only in encapsulated form. And the second obligation is to move away from the use of dental amalgam in children and pregnant breastfeeding women. Next slide is about the four products to be considered at COP5. The COP4 considers all the mercury products proposed by parties and agreed to come back to these four products at COP5. The COP agreed to consider the phase-out dates for these products, and in the uh, in the list on the right-hand side, you will see the phase-out dates in square brackets. So the expectation is that COP5 considers this square bracketed part and try to remove the bracket and come up with a clean text. Batteries. The first one is batteries, and Annex A includes all batteries except button cell zinc silver oxide and zinc air batteries with certain limit of mercury content. The proposal is to include these allowed batteries and cover all the batteries in Annex A. For switches relays, the second one, similarly, the original Annex A allowed special switches and relays for very high accuracy purposes and so on. The proposal is to include these allowed uses and cover all the switches and relays in Annex A. The last two product categories are both linear fluorescent lamps. The current amendment is about bulb type compact fluorescent lamps, but this one is about linear tubes used in offices, stores, factories, and of course also in homes. There are two technologies, tri-band phosphor and halophosphate phosphor. The proposal is to cover all tri-band phosphor tubes below 60 watts and all halophosphate phosphor tubes of all wattage. Letter from the Executive Secretary was sent out in April, inviting parties and stakeholders to submit by the end of this year any information on these mercury products and their alternatives that may support consideration by COP5. We may very much look forward to receiving useful information. I will stop here and hand back to Claudia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Esako. So now we have another 23 minutes where we would be happy to answer any of your questions that you might have that might be hanging around on your side, or anything new that might have emerged as you were listening to our briefing, anything we might have missed to explain, or anything you'd like to clarify further, be it for your specific context or just general. So please feel free to record or put your questions in the chat. It's often a question by one person is very often also helpful for another person. So please don't be shy or think that you might not know something that another person would be equally interested in. We have some comments and somebody sharing some information, but we also have two questions, one from Gilbert and one from Florian. And I think that it's a very valid one that they've brought this up. So let us start with that, but please feel free to add more if you would like to. And to begin to answer or to respond both to Gilbert and Florian's question, let me first just read it to you. Gilbert is both of the questions relate to part 2, that is dental amalgam and the measures there. I had used the word additional measures just simply as a shorthand to indicate what was additional from the original annex to Annex A. So just want to make it crystal clear, as Esako just also did when he showed you part 2, just the measures that are there, and to assure you that these are strong and important measures. In other words, the 2 that have been added by COP2. So let me just read for everybody's benefit Gilbert's comment and also Florian's, and then I will ask my colleague Lynn just to display part 2 so we could just make it easy for you to understand, and Lara and Esako may have additional comments. But Gilbert wrote in part 2, in other words, the dental amalgam, Are they additional measures? Are they a subset of voluntary measures and a subset of mandatory measures adopted at COP4? The framing makes a difference in the implementation. And Gilbert, you're completely right. The framing is extremely important. So let us display it to be crystal clear on the meaning of these two what I call additional measures that have been added to the annex here. And Florian also wrote, and it's linked to this, if I understand him correctly. Would you please clarify that the children's amendment on dental amalgam is not optional but mandatory for all parties by September 28th, 2023? In other words, a year after the notification went out from the depository. So just for those that might not be following it, the Children's Amendment, my understanding is that it relates specifically to the work and the advocacy of many specific dental amalgam measures. And so with that, you see now displayed, this is the amended Annex A. This is the additional document that we made available also by the link, so you can, of course, download it for yourself. And as Esako underlined, already also mentioned, the new measures that are now part of the amended Annex A are the ones that are gray shaded. And indeed, originally, there were 9 measures in the Annex A from which countries or parties, I beg your pardon, parties were meant to implement at least 2, if not more. And then what was the great leap forward at the COP4 is that it reads, in addition, parties shall, and there are 2 measures that have been added. And here there is no differentiation in terms of options on these measures, but these 2 measures are added. And the one is, let me read it, exclude or not allow by taking measures as appropriate the use of mercury in bulk form for dental practitioners. And then also exclude or not allowed by taking measures as appropriate or recommended against the use of dental amalgam for the dental treatment of deciduous teeth of patients under 15 years, in other words, young persons, and also of pregnant and breastfeeding women, except when considered necessary by the dental practitioner based on the needs of the patient. And this, let me turn to Esako for any further explanation, but let me also here say that the use of mercury in bulk form for dental practitioners is a very important new measure to be added, as there is also concern in other circles that mercury that may be coming into a national context that might be considered to be for dental use is actually diverted for other uses. And so we have heard parties speak to the need of curtailing that. So in other words, it not only are those that are heavily involved from the health side about dental amalgam, it's not only a step forward for that community, but also for the other community right alongside that hope to ensure no leakage or seepage of mercury into other places for reasons not actually originally intended. Esako, would you like to speak a bit more to either of those provisions? Please,
Yes.
over to you.
Yes, thank you. Just a small additional technical remarks. Yes, these 2 are not for choosing, but both of them are mandatory. But if you look at the 9 measures, the number 8 is using restricting the use to encapsulate the form. And you may notice that if you implement the first measure, the 8th measure is automatically satisfied. So, but the COP4 didn't replace the annex, but they added. So it means that the 9 measures still remain and 2 mandatory measures are in place. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica. This is really important. That's also why we really think this is a decisive step forward on the journey for this particular product category, and also that it in fact helps other aspects of the overall life cycle of parties being able to regulate and control the use of mercury. We have some comments and some questions, and so I'd like to just make a comment and certainly also highlight that it was already at the time of COP3 that parties were encouraged to use more, or to utilize and to report on more than 2 measures. So it was not a matter of only 1 or 2 of those measures need to be implemented by parties, but these are the measures. Please implement as many as you can and find useful given your national context. And so this is already a good step forward. I just want to underline that part as well. Yeah, and I see. I would like to call on Lara, though, just to give a little bit more detail. Maybe this is a question that might have come to me privately, or a comment that's come to me privately. So, Lara, you might not have seen it, but I just wanted to also make the point that this amendment, or the amended Annex A, was a consensus decision by our COP. But our parties, of course, have slightly different national contexts in which they then take up their new international obligations. And Lara was outlining to you the different options that we have in Article 27. So, of course, while it is was a consensus decision by the COP, it is now, between now that parties and signatories, who hopefully will also join at some point, it is for them now, in this year in between, to make provision at the national level to make it in fact real in the national context. In some national contexts, it might mean that additional measures or regulations have to be put in place, or additional instructions have to be put in place, so that measures will be aligned with the new amendment. In some national contexts, especially national contexts where a country has indicated at the time of ratification that they would look at the products or amendments case by case, they have a slightly different timescale that they would work on. But for the majority of our parties, it does the 1 year time limit or time for entering to pass began on the 28th of September, and this year until just before we meet again in person in Geneva, the 28th of September next year. So just, Lara, what I would just like you just to comment on, maybe just to take us back to your slide, just that there are a smaller amount of countries, just also given their national context, that have slightly different mechanisms until when it's coming into place. Lara, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Claudia. We can I can show you the slide if you wish, but essentially Claudia is correct. For the majority of parties, it is expected that the amendment will enter into force on the 28th of September 2023. With the exception of those parties who will have submitted a notification of non-compliance. And these parties have 1 year since the notification of the depository to do so. For those parties who submit a notification of non-acceptance, the entry into force will be suspended until they withdraw such notification of non-acceptance. You can move back a couple of slides, please, to show the one back and another one back, where you can Yes, so you see the 3 bullets here. So the first bullet is for the will apply to the majority of parties. It is expected at least. So the deadline of the date of the 28th of September 2023 will be the date of entry into force of the amendment for most parties, except for those who decide to notify the depository that they are unable to accept the amendment. And then there is a third exception, which only relates, as I mentioned, to 16 parties who have submitted notification according to paragraph 5 of Article 3. And a declaration that in fact determines a different entry into force procedure. And for those parties, the amendment shall enter into force only on the 90th day after the ratification of the amendment. I hope this is clear, and I hand back over to you, Claudia.
Thank you very much. There are more questions and then there's some comments, and I will try to bulk them together because this is very useful also as exchange of everyone. Let me come to Gabriela, who, if I may pick out the part, it was mentioned that the phase-out timeline for new products in Annex A Part 1 will be discussed at COP5. Will a potential timeline to implement Part 2, that is dental amalgam, be discussed at the COP as well? Let me just highlight here that as per the decision 4.3, the work that was passed forward to COP5 is on 4 product categories and the ones that Esako detailed, and the timelines. At the moment, decision 4.2 did not pass forward any specific work on dental amalgam. Unless Esako and Lara would like to add anything to that, but if there is other consideration of any other timelines or other discussions that some feel may need to be had on dental amalgam, it is not as yet foreseen as per the decision, and but there is a year and a bit until we meet in COP. I see a number of comments about Jeff project, and I need to say we would probably need to revert. Thank you for your comments. With probably one of my colleagues who works very closely on the Jeff project is on our call today. But let us look internally very closely at the comments that you are making on the Jeff project, so that we can we can work out exactly what, because there appears to be quite a bit of concern by the comment made. So let us look into that with our colleagues and after this meeting, if you would allow. Because just to say, it is really important, of course, that the financial mechanism of the convention is there to help our parties in the best way forward to implement the work, and of course the work on dental amalgam is very, very important in so many different contexts. So we see the importance of a Jeff project really making that difference. So let us look at your concerns that you voiced here, and if you have more, then please let us know and we will come back to you on that. I see a question from Japan. Hitoshi, welcome to our meeting. And if I may read this question, in the text of the amended Annex A, which has been posted on the depository, is it the same which the COP agreed with, or are there any textual edits from the formal or during the formal editing process in the UN? He writes, as what I have read, I have not seen any revisions, but just in case, I'd appreciate if you could clarify any revisions so that we can reflect them also in our local language. And I want to just thank you for that particular question, because it also gives me a little bit of an opening, perhaps just to explain why it's taken some time for the depository to be in contact with all of the parties and the signatories. Just to explain that after a COP, all of our formal documentation is per usual handled by the UN editors, that in terms of report writing, and of course all of our decisions as well, and the translators ensure that everything is translated according to into the 6 UN languages, but also that at the end every language version is equal to every other, so that every party can take any of the language versions as the formal text. And this is a UN standard. For amendments to the convention, this becomes incredibly important, of course, and as we were working with an original Annex A, and to which now, as you saw, lines were added with new product categories, this process took a bit more time to really ensure that everything is really correct. And also correct according and equal to the 6 UN languages. So it took a little bit more time than even we as a Secretariat had hoped or anticipated. And we also worked very closely with the depository, who itself also does another language check just on their side, both through their legal eyes and also just to ensure nothing has been missed on the actual languages. So this is a process, and that's why it takes a bit of time for all of those that might have wondered why we haven't been able to alert you to this earlier. It is a sequential process, but I can confirm to you that any change that was done was simply editorial. There is no actual change to any of the text. If I recall well, there was a little I added or clarified. I can check if you would like. I'm very happy to let you know the actual small, tiny edits that might have been made. I recognize that for Japan and other countries that our decisions are being translated by governments to be of use. So I can happily be in contact with you, but I can assure you that there was no change at all, and the editors are extremely aware of how important it is not to touch such language. I see more questions, and I can certainly also say that we will be making our presentation and our recording available as usual afterwards, so please don't worry about that. We have 3 more minutes if there are any other questions. I see there is something more coming through, but if anything still comes up, please put it in and we'll try to squeeze it into our 3 minutes. We see there's something from Sylvia. She writes, will the Secretariat be communicating with other international bodies about the mandatory nature of the Children's Amendment on dental amalgam? And she refers specifically to the second measure, excluding and not allowing taking measures as appropriate or recommending against the use of dental amalgam for persons under 15, and of course to pregnant and breastfeeding women. May I actually ask Esako to speak to this, because we work, of course, also hand in hand with the WHO, of course, on this matter. But Esako, could you expand a little bit on this?
Thank you, Claudia. Yes, we are in very close communication with WHO. I do not recall the name of the meeting, but I recently attended the meeting to follow up on the progress of their work on oral care, oral health, and we in terms of the WHO, there's no misunderstanding on the nature of the amendment, but of course, if there's any concern, I'd be happy to receive any information about the suspected misunderstanding, and we will be happy to work with other intergovernmental organizations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Esako. I see that let me also return to another comment by Sylvia in response also to the question from Gabriela. And she writes, please clarify in response to Gabriela's question that the Children's Amendment, in other words, the 2 under additionally parties shall under Part 2, please clarify in response to Gabriela's question that that measure must be implemented on a timeline it does not need to be raised again at COP5 for this to happen. Isak, maybe you could explain a bit more, but let me just explain that no timeline on that measure is currently set to need to be negotiated. But Isak, you were in the heart of all of this, if you can add anything else to that matter.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, for the Annex A Part 1, there's a phase-out deadline, and after which parties shall not allow the manufacture, import, and export of mercury added products. But the Annex A Part 2 is about the measures to be taken, and there was no discussion on the deadline. So our understanding is that this obligation applies with the entry into force of the amended Annex A. Thank you.
Thank you. We've arrived at 4 o'clock, but Lara, was there any other comments still from your side that I might have not turned to you for that need, or any other comment you'd like to still make? No, it's okay. Then we're at 4 o'clock. Thank you for all your time to be with us this afternoon, or your morning, or your evening, depending on which. If there's something that comes to mind that we haven't answered, or if there's still something additional that you think of as you work on these topics in the next weeks and days and months, please feel free to reach out to us. And as mentioned, we shall put our presentation and, of course, the recording on our website later on. Thank you for your time, attention, and all your work you do on Minamata and Mercury. And we hope to see you soon for other briefings. So with that, on behalf of my colleagues, goodbye and keep well. Bye-bye.